Before another thought pulls your attention away, remain here for a moment, because what began as an ordinary conversation became something neither your soulmate nor their mother expected. There was no grand plan behind it. No dramatic setting. Just a quiet moment that seemed almost forgettable at first. Yet some of the most meaningful truths arrive when no one is preparing for them. Your soulmate had been carrying thoughts about you for longer than anyone realized. Thoughts they tried to organize, explain, and even hide from themselves. But feelings have a way of growing louder when they are genuine, and eventually the weight of those unspoken emotions became impossible to keep locked away. That is when they sat down with their mother. Not to make an announcement. Not to seek permission. Simply to speak honestly. Yet honesty often opens doors that were never expected to move. As your name entered the conversation, something shifted in the atmosphere. The room remained quiet, but the energy inside it changed. Your soulmate noticed it immediately. Their mother listened carefully. More carefully than usual. Every detail mattered to her. Every word carried significance. And as your soulmate continued speaking, describing the way you think, the way you care, the way you leave an impression without even trying, she became unusually still. It was almost as if she was connecting pieces of a puzzle she had been holding for years without realizing it. A strange thing happens when someone speaks about a person who has touched their heart deeply. Their voice changes. Their eyes reveal things words cannot. Their silence becomes just as meaningful as their sentences. That is exactly what happened. The more your soulmate spoke, the less they realized they were revealing. They talked about moments that seemed small. Conversations that lingered in memory longer than expected. Tiny details that most people would have forgotten. Their mother noticed every one of them. She noticed how often your name appeared naturally. She noticed how the room seemed brighter whenever your soulmate mentioned you. She noticed how even uncertainty disappeared when they spoke about your character. Then something unexpected happened. She interrupted. Not because she disagreed. Not because she was upset. But because she suddenly understood something that your soulmate had not fully understood themselves. Her expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly. She leaned forward. And for a brief moment, neither of them said anything. It was as though a realization had arrived before words could catch up to it. Don't skip, because this is where the story quietly begins to reveal its deeper meaning. What startled your soulmate was not the interruption itself. It was what came before it. A look. A pause. A feeling that something important was about to be spoken aloud. Their mother had heard many conversations throughout her life. She had watched people mistake temporary emotions for lasting connections. She had seen excitement fade and promises disappear. Yet this felt different to her. There was a sincerity she could not ignore. Something grounded. Something steady. Something rare. And although she had never met you in the way your soulmate had, she could sense your presence through the stories being told. Through the admiration hidden between simple words. Through the respect that appeared every time your name was mentioned. It became impossible for her to treat this conversation as ordinary. The realization was building. Slowly. Quietly. Like dawn approaching before the first light becomes visible. Your soulmate felt it too, though they could not explain why. All they knew was that the conversation was no longer about casual feelings. It was becoming something far more meaningful. Then another layer revealed itself. Their mother began asking questions. Not the usual questions. Not about appearances. Not about status. Not about things that fade with time. She asked about kindness. About patience. About the way you respond when life becomes difficult. About how you make others feel. Each answer seemed to strengthen whatever conclusion she was reaching inside her own mind. Your soulmate found themselves remembering moments they had overlooked before. Moments that suddenly appeared more significant than they once seemed. A message sent at the right time. A thoughtful gesture. A conversation that stayed in their heart long after it ended. The pieces continued connecting. The picture continued forming. And the silence between questions became heavier with meaning. Something important was waiting just beyond reach. Something neither of them could fully see yet. The evening moved forward, but neither of them realized they were standing at the edge of a realization that would change how they viewed everything. Your soulmate thought they were simply sharing their feelings. Their mother saw something else entirely. She saw consistency where others might see coincidence. She saw depth where others might see attraction. She saw the early signs of a connection built on something stronger than excitement alone. That was why her reactions became impossible to predict. She was no longer listening only as a mother. She was listening as someone who had lived enough life to recognize certain truths when they quietly appeared. And what she was recognizing was causing emotions she did not expect to feel. Something important is waiting for you. Because the most surprising moment of that conversation had not happened yet. It was still approaching. Still forming. Still gathering strength beneath the surface. Your soulmate continued speaking, unaware that every sentence was bringing them closer to a revelation neither of them could ignore. Their mother sat quietly for a long moment. Longer than before. The room felt suspended between one chapter and the next. Then she drew a slow breath. Her eyes filled with an emotion that seemed difficult to describe. And just as she finally began to speak, your soulmate realized that whatever came next would stay with them forever. Yet the words themselves, the words are only beginning to emerge. And what she was about to say would reveal far more than either of them expected. The next sound in the room was not a sentence. It was a breath. A slow, thoughtful breath that seemed to carry years of experience inside it. Your soulmate waited. They had never seen their mother hesitate like this before. Usually, her opinions arrived quickly. Usually, her thoughts were clear and immediate. But now she appeared to be choosing her words with unusual care, as if she understood that once they were spoken, something could never be unsaid. The silence stretched for another moment. Then another. And strangely, that silence revealed more than conversation ever could. Your soulmate could feel that she had reached a conclusion. The only mystery remaining was what that conclusion actually was. 1,000 possibilities crossed their mind, yet none of them prepared them for the emotion they saw in her eyes. It was not concern. It was not doubt. It was not hesitation. It looked remarkably like recognition. As though she had finally identified something that had been standing in front of her all along. Without warning, her expression softened. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Just enough for your soulmate to notice. She leaned back slightly and looked toward the window for a brief moment. It was almost as though she was remembering something from her own life. A memory. A lesson. A chapter she had once lived through herself. Then she looked back and asked a question that completely changed the direction of the conversation. When was the last time you went a full day without thinking about them? The question landed with unexpected weight. Your soulmate opened their mouth to answer, but nothing came out immediately. They searched their memory. Yesterday? No. Last week? No. Even during busy moments, thoughts of you seem to appear naturally. Not in an overwhelming way. Not in a distracting way. Just quietly. Consistently. Like a familiar melody that never completely leaves the background. For the first time, they realized how often your presence occupied space in their thoughts. A curious thing happens when someone asks the right question. Suddenly, details that once felt ordinary become impossible to ignore. Your soulmate began remembering countless moments they had dismissed. Tiny moments. Meaningful moments. The way they smiled unexpectedly after hearing from you. The way difficult days felt lighter after a conversation with you. The way certain plans felt incomplete when you were not part of them. Their mother listened carefully as these realizations unfolded. She was not surprised by any of it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved. As though each answer was confirming something she had already begun to suspect. And the more she listened, the clearer her understanding became. There was no rush in her response. No dramatic declaration. Just a growing certainty that continued settling deeper with every passing second. Then something unexpected happened. Their mother laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Not because she was dismissing what was being said. It was the kind of laugh people make when a mystery finally solves itself. A quiet laugh filled with understanding. Your soulmate looked confused. What? They asked. She shook her head gently. Nothing, she said at first. But it was obvious that it was not nothing. There was something she had realized. Something she was still deciding how to express. The room seemed smaller now. The conversation felt closer. More personal. More significant. Every word mattered. Every pause mattered. And for reasons your soulmate could not explain, they suddenly felt nervous. Not anxious. Not afraid. Just aware that they were standing very close to a truth they had never fully examined before. Stay till the end, because this is where everything begins to take shape. Their mother slowly folded her hands and looked directly at them. You know, she said, most people talk about someone because they are interested. Some talk because they are curious. Others talk because they are excited. She paused again. But you, another pause. Longer this time. You talk about this person differently. The word settled over the room like sunlight entering through an open curtain. Your soulmate immediately wanted to ask what she meant. Yet something inside them already knew. They had spoken about you countless times without realizing how much those conversations revealed. Every memory they shared carried warmth. Every observation carried respect. Every mention carried sincerity. Their mother had noticed what they had overlooked. She had noticed that whenever your name appeared, something genuine appeared alongside it. The realization continued building. Layer by layer. Piece by piece. Until it became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate felt as though they were seeing their own feelings from a completely new perspective. Not through their eyes. through someone else's. Through the eyes of a person who could observe what they themselves were too close to recognize. And sometimes that perspective changes everything. Sometimes another person can identify the truth before we are ready to admit it ourselves. That was exactly what was happening now. Their mother was gently holding up a mirror. Not to criticize. Not to challenge. But to help them see what had quietly grown inside their heart over time. The evening outside continued as normal. Cars passed. Lights flickered in distant windows. Ordinary life moved forward. Yet inside that conversation, something extraordinary was unfolding. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that what they felt was deeper than they had allowed themselves to believe. And their mother could see that understanding arriving in real time. She watched it happen. She watched the realization settle into place. She watched certainty slowly replace confusion. Then she nodded to herself as though a final piece had finally clicked into position. And that was the exact moment her composure broke. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But enough for your soulmate to immediately notice. Her eyes widened. She sat upright. And before she could stop herself, the words escaped her lips with a force neither of them expected. The first part of that sentence finally emerged. You are. And the moment those two words entered the room, everything changed. The words hung in the air. You are. For a brief moment, nothing followed. It was as though time itself had paused to listen. Your soulmate stared at their mother, waiting for the rest of the sentence. The reaction had been so unexpected, so genuine, that it immediately captured their full attention. They had expected advice. Perhaps a thoughtful observation. Maybe even a gentle warning to move carefully. But this was different. Something in her voice suggested that she had reached a conclusion far greater than any ordinary opinion. She looked away for a moment and shook her head softly, almost smiling to herself. Then she said something that completely changed the atmosphere. You are talking about someone who has already changed you. The room became quiet again. Not because the statement was dramatic. Because it was true. And truth often arrives with a strange kind of stillness. Your soulmate immediately wanted to disagree. They wanted to explain that nothing major had happened yet. That there had been no grand moment, no life-changing event, no obvious turning point. But the more they thought about it, the more difficult it became to deny what she was saying. Because change does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives through consistency. Through small moments repeated over time. Through conversations remembered months later. Through a person whose influence quietly becomes part of your everyday thoughts. Their mother could see the realization forming behind their eyes. You think you're still figuring this out, she continued gently. But listen carefully. People don't speak this way about someone unless that person has already left a mark on their heart. Those words settled deeply. Your soulmate replayed countless memories. The first conversations. The unexpected comfort. The feeling of being understood without needing to explain everything. The moments that seemed ordinary at the time but now appeared far more meaningful. One by one, those memories returned. And each one carried a quiet weight. A significance they had never fully acknowledged. Outside, the evening light began fading. Inside, another kind of light seemed to be appearing. A clearer understanding. A clearer perspective. A clearer view of what had truly been growing all this time. Then something even more surprising happened. Their mother began sharing a story from her own past. Not because she wanted to compare experiences. Because she recognized a familiar pattern. When I was younger, she said softly, I once spent months convincing myself that someone was simply important to me. I kept creating explanations. I kept finding reasons. I kept telling myself it wasn't what everyone else thought. She smiled. A funny thing happened. Your soulmate listened carefully. The more I tried to explain it away, the more obvious it became. That sentence landed with unexpected force. Because deep inside, they knew exactly what she meant. How many times had they minimized their feelings? How many times had they told themselves they were overthinking? How many times had they dismissed moments that clearly mattered? Their mother wasn't trying to persuade them. She wasn't trying to push them toward any conclusion. She was simply pointing toward something already visible. Something they had overlooked because they were standing too close to it. Don't skip. Because the conversation was still moving toward something neither of them had anticipated. A realization was approaching. Not sudden. Not rushed. But inevitable. The kind of realization that becomes clearer with every passing minute. Their mother folded her hands together and became thoughtful again. Then she asked another unexpected question. What do you think is the first thing people notice when someone truly matters to them? Your soulmate considered the question. The answer seemed obvious at first. Appearance. Personality. Chemistry. Shared interests. But she slowly shook her head. No. She paused. The first thing they notice is that they start imagining a future where that person is present. The room became silent once more. Because that question had quietly revealed something important. How many future thoughts already included you? How many plans felt more meaningful because of your presence? How many hopes naturally placed you somewhere inside them? Your soulmates suddenly found themselves unable to answer. Not because there was no answer. Because there were too many. And their silence told their mother everything she needed to know. She smiled again. A calm smile. A knowing smile. The kind that comes from recognizing something beautiful before another person sees it themselves. The conversation had started with curiosity. Then it became reflection. Now it was becoming clarity. Something important is waiting for you. Because the statement that began with, "You are," was not actually finished. Not yet. Those two words had only opened the door. The real meaning behind them was still unfolding. Their mother could feel it. Your soulmate could feel it. Even though neither of them had spoken it aloud. The truth was growing stronger with every passing second. Then her expression changed once more. She looked directly at them. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Just complete sincerity. And in that moment, she finally prepared to reveal the deeper reason those words had escaped her so suddenly. The reason she reacted the way she did. The reason she became emotional. The reason the conversation felt so different from every other conversation before it. She took a slow breath. Looked directly into their eyes. And quietly said, "No. That's not what surprised me most. Your soulmate froze. Because if everything she had already said wasn't the biggest realization, then what was? And the answer to that question was about to reveal something neither of them had considered before. A strange stillness settled over the room after those words. No. That's not what surprised me most. Your soulmate felt their heartbeat quicken, not from fear, but from curiosity. Until now, every observation their mother had shared seemed important enough to be the conclusion. Every realization felt like the answer. Yet somehow, she was telling them that something even deeper had caught her attention. For a few seconds, she simply looked at them. Not studying them. Not judging them. Just looking. As though she was seeing a version of them they had not fully seen themselves. Then she spoke again. You know what surprised me? Her voice was calm. It's not how much you talk about this person. A pause. It's who you become when you do. The words landed softly, yet they carried unexpected weight. Your soulmate blinked. For the first time that evening, they had no immediate response. Because they had been focused entirely on you. They had never stopped to examine themselves. Their mother noticed their confusion and smiled gently. Every time you mention them, something changes. Again, silence. Again, reflection. What changes? They finally asked. She leaned back slightly. Your face relaxes. Another pause. You stop overthinking. Another pause. You sound hopeful. The room became quiet. Not because there was nothing to say. Because there was suddenly too much to think about. Your soulmate replayed countless conversations in their mind. Every story. Every memory. Every mention of you. And slowly, they realized she was right. There was a difference. Subtle. But undeniable. Whenever thoughts of you appeared, something inside them seemed lighter. Not because life became perfect. Not because every problem disappeared. But because your presence carried a certain peace they rarely found elsewhere. That realization alone would have been enough to make the evening unforgettable. Yet the conversation continued moving forward. Layer after layer. Truth after truth. Like a curtain slowly being pulled back. Their mother looked toward the table and traced her finger lightly across its surface before speaking again. Most people search for someone who impresses them. She paused. But very few find someone who inspires them to become more themselves. The sentence lingered. Your soulmate immediately understood the difference. One is admiration. The other is transformation. One is temporary excitement. The other quietly changes the direction of a person's heart. And somewhere deep inside, they knew exactly which one they were experiencing. Don't skip. Because the most unexpected part of the conversation was still ahead. The realization that had caused their mother's emotional reaction had not fully surfaced yet. Not even close. Outside, the sky had grown darker. The room felt warmer. The conversation deeper. It no longer felt like a casual discussion about feelings. It felt like a discovery. A discovery happening in real time. Then something remarkable happened. Their mother stood up and walked toward a nearby shelf. She wasn't searching for anything specific. She simply needed a moment to gather her thoughts. When she turned back, there was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. A softness that came from certainty. And certainty has a unique kind of calm. She returned to her seat and looked directly at your soulmate. "I think you've been focusing on the wrong question." That immediately caught their attention. "The wrong question?" She nodded. "Yes." A pause. "You keep asking yourself whether this person is important." Another pause. "But that's not the real question anymore." Your soulmate felt completely absorbed by every word. Because something told them she was about to reveal the realization that had been building throughout the entire evening. "The real question," she said quietly, "is why this connection feels so natural." The room fell silent again. Natural. That word echoed through their mind. Not forced. Not complicated. Not something that required endless explanation. Just natural. Like a conversation that flows effortlessly. Like understanding that appears without effort. Like familiarity arriving before enough time has passed to explain it. And suddenly, many things made sense. Moments that once felt confusing now felt clear. Moments that once felt random now seemed connected. Moments that once felt small now appeared meaningful. Their mother noticed the realization happening. She could see it. She could feel it. And it made her smile. Not because she had convinced them of anything. But because they were finally recognizing what had been quietly growing inside their own heart. Something important is waiting for you. Because at that exact moment, her eyes became emotional. Not dramatically. Not overwhelmingly. Just enough for your soulmate to notice. And that surprised them more than anything else. Their mother was not someone who became emotional easily. Yet here she was, struggling to hide it. "Why are you emotional?" they asked softly. She laughed gently and shook her head. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she finally did. Because very few people get to witness something genuine while it's still unfolding. Those words touched something deep inside the room. Something neither of them expected. Something neither of them could fully explain. And then she added one more sentence. A sentence that immediately changed everything. A sentence that finally began revealing the true meaning behind the words she had nearly shouted earlier. The words that started with, "You are." She looked directly at your soulmate. Her voice softened. Her eyes filled with certainty. And just before she revealed what she truly meant, she said, "I don't think you realize what this person has already become in your life." The room became completely still. Because whatever came next would finally explain why her reaction had been so immediate. Why her voice had risen unexpectedly. Why she had interrupted the conversation. Why she had become emotional. And why the words, "You are," had escaped her lips before she could stop them. The answer was finally approaching. Closer than ever before. Yet the most meaningful part of the revelation had still not been spoken aloud.